Hello, and thanks for joining me in the middle of the week. For the second week in a row, I feel the need to talk about something that really is heartbreaking. Last week we talked about the news of 215 Indigenous children whose remains were discovered at a former residential school, which was no surprise to our Indigenous neighbors. It was a surprise to many of us who aren't Indigenous simply because we didn't listen to our Indigenous neighbors when they told us of the atrocities that have gone on, continue to go on. This week we have another heartbreaking event to process, and that is the death of 4 people in London, 4 members of a family of 5 who were out for a walk, and yet someone decided to intentionally strike them down with their car or with their truck, and it's left us reeling as a community. How could this happen? In both situations, if you've got empathy inside of you, if you've got a heart that's beating in your chest, you've got to look at it and say, how can this keep happening? How can we keep seeing these kinds of terrible atrocities going on in the world when we think we're learning more, we think that we're becoming more enlightened? You look at it all, and a natural question is, well, what has to change for these kinds of things to stop happening? Change is not an easy thing to discuss because none of us like change. I don't think it comes easily to any of us, and often we shortcut change. I'm sitting out here in our backyard right now because we've got a sidewalk here that I laid down years ago, and when I put it down, I didn't bother to put any real base underneath it. And of course, over time, the stones shifted. From time to time, I might throw a bit of dirt under one side of a stone or another to try to prop it back up. But that was no way to really solve the issue. The only way to solve it is to remove the stones, dig down deep, and put down a solid foundation. In this case, I've got gravel, there's sand waiting to go down before I put those stones back on top. For change, lasting change to happen, we have to be prepared to move aside what's visible and obvious and dig underneath to what isn't obvious. And I think we see this with Jesus. Jesus challenges us, our actions, our words, our behavior, but he does it not just saying, hey, you need to change what's on the surface. He actually digs underneath. And I see this in many places, but in the Sermon on the Mount, one of the most famous messages that Jesus delivered, in Matthew chapter 5, he says this: "You have been told to love only your own people and to despise others as your enemy. But I tell you, treat your enemies with love and respect, and send up good prayers for the ones who make trouble for you and bring you pain. This will show that you are full-grown children of your Father from above, who sends his blessing of rain on the ones who do right and the ones who do wrong." Jesus challenges our assumptions, the way that we have always done it, which is, I am going to love those who are like me and who I like, and I'm going to despise those who are different from me and who I don't like. And Jesus says, well, you aren't to do it like that. You are to love your enemies. Well, it's fine to say, be different, act different. But that's only dealing with the surface. Jesus goes on to dig underneath, and he says, look at your Father in heaven. Look at God and the way he treats us. It doesn't matter if you're good or bad, whether you behave well or behave poorly. The rain falls on everyone. God sends his blessings. God takes care of. God wants to give life and a chance for a relationship with him to everyone. And if God is that indiscriminate with his blessings, then how can we be any less so? And of course, as Jesus talks about that, he doesn't say who the good and who the bad are, because we all have done bad and good. We all are guilty. We could all have somebody else point at us, at me, and say, you're one of the bad ones. and you don't deserve what I deserve. But if we really dig underneath and see the foundation that God has laid, see the way that God views the very people he made, then what we see is that God isn't sorting us into good and bad and giving great things to the good people and lousy things to the bad people. He's not justifying terrible behavior towards certain people and not others. He's allowing his sun to rise on both and his rain to fall on both. And if God does that, then how can we do any less? Jesus is asking us to dig down underneath our behavior and our words and to examine our motivations, our thoughts, and the way that we actually view humanity. Do we view other people as people who are wonderfully, beautifully made by God and who are blessed by God? If we start categorizing people as the blessed and the unblessed, then we actually set up a situation where we decide someone's life is less deserving than ours. We set up a situation where we think privileges belong to some and not others. It's time to change something, but change isn't going to happen simply because I try harder or because I try to appear better. Change only comes when we allow God to build a foundation, his foundation under our lives, to see other people the way he sees all people, and to own up to the fact that I could be viewed as the enemy. I am just as bad as someone else I might want to label. And ultimately, that was the message that Jesus came to deliver, and that was the action that Jesus came to accomplish, to give up his own life for you and for me, because none of us deserve it, but God wants us to have a chance at life and forgiveness and a relationship with him. We all stand on equal footing before God. It's time to change some things about the way we think, but you and I are going to have to do the hard work of removing the obvious and digging down underneath and examining our motives and examining how far we are from the way God views others and the world around us. It's worth it, though. It's worth it to follow in the footsteps of the one who laid down his life for all people. God bless you. Let's continue on this walk together, and we will talk again soon.